Hi, Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and here's another interview in my series of interviews with subscribers. Enjoy!
Got it.
Okay, great, Rob. Well, Rob is our interviewee today, and I know Rob because we both belong to the same group online called the Quilter's Way that is operated out of Calgary, Canada. And yeah, Rob is an original to that group, so am I. So we're called founding members. We're not really founding members. We were just the first to get on the bandwagon, I guess. But anyways, Rob's in the Netherlands. And Rob, do you want to give us your full name? Because I'm afraid I'm always afraid I'm going to pronounce your last name incorrectly. And where you're located in the Netherlands.
My full name is John Robert Hale Hunter-Deuling.
Okay. And where in the Netherlands are you located?
I live in a small town called Vlissingen, which in the translation of English is Flushing,
Oh,
as in Flushing Meadows, New York. And it's a small coastal town in the islands on the south, and I'm on the Belgian border and the coast.
oh, okay. So, but you're not originally from the Netherlands, are you?
No, I am American. I was born in Tennessee, grew up in Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, went to university in Mississippi. So I'm about as southern as you can get.
So, how long have you been living in the Netherlands then?
It'll be 21 years in December.
Oh, okay. So you're pretty much Dutch, so to speak.
No,
No.
I'm not Dutch.
Well, we'll save that discussion for another day because I have my husband is Dutch, so or background in Dutch, and yeah, we could go on for days about that, but we wouldn't be very politically correct if we did. So let's jump right into this.
Well, tell Walter, my former partner before he passed away was Zeus.
Oh, okay. He'll probably understand that. So let's
He
get into it.
that means he was from Ceylon.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if I have to repeat anything in Dutch, it's not good. It's not good. So how long have you been quilting?
Oh, 40, 45 years.
Okay, got a lot of years under your belt then. So how'd you get started?
I had a I had a bone disease when I was younger, and I had to walk on crutches. So that took me out from playing sports and doing the normal things that a child of the 60s would have done.
Right.
So after school, I had to stay with my grandmother, and she was a sewer. She made Cabbage Patch dolls.
Oh, you're kidding.
I don't know if that was a thing in Canada, but it was really
Yeah.
big in the early 70s in America for extra money. And so I was bored. And of course, you didn't have 200 channels of TV back then. So what did you do? And I couldn't do the normal things. So I would take the scraps and I started hand quilting and hand piecing. And my grandmother taught me. And my first was like either a baby blanket or a crib blanket for the Cabbage Patch dolls made with their clothing
Hmm.
scraps. And I really, really enjoyed hand quilting. I I've always, until the last 5 or 6 years, I've always been a hand quilter. I hand pieced. I did everything by hand, cut with scissors, the whole 9 yards. And I progressed. My grandmother, after a couple of years of working in the living room, started taking me to her monthly quilt bee with the ladies. And when I learned to drive at 16, my grandmother didn't drive. So I had to take her everywhere. So I got more education. Uh, I took my grandmother, she was a FAF person. And so we went to Nashville, which is where I grew up in a small country town outside of Nashville, to take a class from a gentleman named Philip Pepper. And he was like the FAF artisan of the 70s and the 80s.
Mm.
And he wrote several books. And I know I drove her to Nashville for this class, and I was ready to be bored to death all day long. And Philip in the class said, "We can't have you bored in the corner," and went into the showroom, got me the new top of the line FAF of the time, brought it into the classroom, set it down, and he goes, "You're going to take this class with us." And FAF has put a lot of his videos on YouTube now, and I've gone back and watched them, and I'm like, this man is amazing. All the things that we use, though, like your little t-shirt menu that does ribbon stitching and edge lace and all that kind of stuff on your machine.
Yeah.
He does it by hand with the machine without those features.
Oh, geez. I can't imagine.
And, like, it was amazing what he could make a FAF do. And now that I'm older, I'm like even more amazed. But since this pandemic, and what happened was I quit hand quilting. I had a stroke in 2008. And one of the side effects was I had a lot of damage to my vision. And I also, my hands still work, but they don't close fully, and I can't hold a needle and thread. It's too small.
Right.
So I started machine piecing. And I was so against it because I was like, oh, a quilter can't use a machine. That's not a quilt, that's a blanket when you use a machine. Boy, was I wrong.
So I know so your grandmother had a lot of influence on you, obviously. Was there anybody else in your family that influenced you? Or anybody else besides the people you said? So really it was your grandmother that was the quilter.
My grandmother and her little old ladies group. and like I said, I would go to the bee every month. They would smack my hand if my stitches were too small or too big. When we were on the quilt frame as a group. They taught me to quilt using a spoon. So you can, and what you do is in the quilt frame is you take a big, like a tablespoon, and you put it up under the quilt, and you can see the tip pop up through your quilt, and then you can take your needle and come up on that point.
Wow.
And so you can judge your stitch length as you go down, and then eventually you just get where you can eye it, know it, and you can start rocking the needle and do like a whole bunch of stitches at one time.
Right.
But I mean, let me tell you, if one of them was out of place, your knuckles got wrapped.
I guess so. So you learn really by trial by fire. So to speak.
And actually, I was a pretty good quilter in my younger years. I won several blue ribbons at the state fair in Tennessee.
Wow.
And then when I left and went off to college, that quilting kind of got in the wayside. I went to Pensacola and I was working for the military, and I got back into quilting by hand a little bit. Several of friends of ours at the base that we knew, every year we made a big handmade quilt to to auction off at the for some of the military charities like Marine Family Services, Navy Family Services, to help families in distress. Because in those days, the military was its own world.
Right, right.
And they took care of their own. And so then I got really big into my career, went to California. Quilting kind of went by the wayside because just didn't have time.
Right.
And then I moved to New York in 2000, right after the first of the year. And I met my former partner in New York through friends. And of course, in 2001, September 11th happened. I decided I wanted to slow down and needed a change. So I ended up moving to the Netherlands.
Okay.
And I've been here ever since.
So, what kind of quilter would you describe yourself as? Are you traditional, modern, combination of those things?
Very traditional.
I was going to say, because you did all the hand quilting and that, I would think so.
And I still do, even by machine, I do everything the old way.
Right. So what would you say your favorite creation is then? Or do you have one?
I don't have one. The last few years, I've been trying to redevelop my style, and I've been going through making just all kinds of different quilts.
Right.
Kim from Chatterbox Quilts and the Quilter Way talked me into trying raw edge applique.
Yeah.
Hated it. It looks unfinished.
I know what you mean.
Messy.
Yeah.
It looks messy.
Yeah.
And so, but I was trying it. It was faster. I got into the embroidery machines and really love doing lace-based quilts. Have intermittent contact with the lady in the U.S. called Susan Stewart. If you know of any of her quilts, she's a very big award quilter, but the embroidery she does is just beyond amazing.
And it's all hand done, I would assume.
No, she does everything by machine.
Oh, okay.
And she was one of the ladies that I started. And I was looking for my first machine. I bought it based on the reviews. I bought a Juki F600. Was my first real machine. That did not last long.
No.
And the reason was my neighbors heard it more clearly than I did.
Oh. Isn't that
and
funny?
I even went over to their apartment and it sounded like a jackhammer in their apartment. And you could barely hear it here. Just do not understand it.
Huh.
So I was lucky. A lady at the local quilt shop that I knew wanted a Juki. So she ended up buying it off of me because there's no Juki dealer here. And she was older and couldn't get up north where the bigger dealers are at. So I ended up, but with the Juki and talking to Susan Stewart, I wanted to get into embroidery. So my dealer put me into a Husqvarna Viking, a used Topaz, 50. No, it was a 30. And loved that machine. One day I was doing one of my big lace projects and the needle went down in the machine and it just kind of went and stopped. Needle frozen into the quilt. And we're talking into the quilt like several million stitches into the quilt.
Oh, geez.
So I couldn't rip it out. Could not get the needle out. So I bundled the machine up with the quilt attached and went to the dealer. They couldn't figure out why it wouldn't come out. Ended up taking wire cutters and clipping the needle in half
Oh,
to
gee.
get my quilt out. I'm like,
Oh,
I was like, I could have done that, but I wasn't thinking.
yeah.
Like,
But right. Yeah, let the
and
professionals look after it.
so they tried to fix my Viking and it was too far gone. I had bought it used, cheaply used. It was a heavily used machine. It was very inexpensive. And they found out that I put 150 million stitches in the 2 years that I owned it after it was heavily used.
Yeah.
So we just marked it up that it died.
Yeah. Overuse.
And I bought my Janome that day.
Yeah.
Off of reviews. I will never go by reviews ever again.
No.
Nope. Because I found out that sewing machines are personal.
I agree with that. Yes. I have found that in my own limited experience.
And this Janome is a beautiful machine. I used to have a friend. She here in Ceylon. She had a 15,000 like you used to have.
Yeah.
She loved her 15,000. She passed away. She'd come over here and help me, and she could make this machine dance across the floor.
Some
And
people can.
it's like pulling teeth, and it sews beautifully. It's the great machine. I just can't make it work.
Yeah. Well,
As smart as I am, it's like,
yep. Well, it's sometimes like a
there's nothing
dog.
wrong with it.
You know, sometimes
And
like a dog. You know, some people get along with animals fine, and they say this dog's really friendly. You walk up to it and it wants to bite you. So I think a sewing machine in some ways is like that too. They either like you or hate you.
And I went through a lot of machines, but when I bought this Janome, my dealer has been on a buying spree of buying little sewing shops and merging them into his conglomerate.
Hmm.
And so all the little sewing shops around the Netherlands, most of them are owned by him. And so in one of the shops, he found these two old Bernina Artista 200s.
Oh, geez.
And I was in there and I was like, what are you going to do with those? He goes, I have absolutely no clue because I can't sell them, but they're brand spanking new in the box.
Hmm.
They got lost in a warehouse somewhere.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You know. And so us talking, and for me buying the Janome, I got a Bernina.
Oh, geez, a 2-4. That's a pretty good deal.
That's my joke when the Bernina snobs. Well, if Berninas are so good, why did I get a free one with my Janome?
Yeah. That's pretty good. So let's move on here so you were talking about applique and embroidery. So what's your favorite technique or tool?
I haven't decided.
So you like it all, really?
I haven't decided. I've been doing a lot of piecing this year because I got into the embroidery because of my eyesight in my hands. I get where my hands shake. That's part of the stroke. So my quilting is not the best. I have good quilting days and I have bad quilting days. And when my hands start to shake, I just stop quilting and go do something else.
Yeah.
So I was doing everything in the embroidery machine, or trying to, even piecing in the hoop, which is an interesting concept unto itself. And it was the weirdest thing. I met the Martellis. I know you have a Martelli cutting mat.
Yeah.
Well, come to find out, they're really good friends of my Pensacola family.
Oh,
So I've adapted to the Martelli way of life. That was
right.
my first big jump because I was having a hard time cutting.
Hmm.
My hands would slip, my ruler would slip, everybody does it, but I was having a hard time.
Yeah.
So I got the Martelli templates. I have the square ones, the diamonds, the hexies, the skinny rulers, and all different shapes and sizes. They've even cut me custom sized ones. I have a 16 by 16 to cut a piece of fabric to fit in this Janome 230 by 300.
Oh, good idea. That makes life easier. Yeah.
Exactly. And they cut it for me custom and all that because of our relationship. And also my FAF has a 350 by 360 hoop, but
Hmm.
because the FAF hoops are different, they don't have as much border space. So
Right.
the 60 by 16 fits in them as in that one as well.
Okay. So
So it's a really handy, but I have all their different shapes. I have the half square triangles. I have the whole 9 yards.
yeah,
I have the cutting mats, the cutters, and they are a godsend.
they should make you an ambassador for Martelli.
I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see, this is the thing. I'm an ambassador for the Martelli. I'm an ambassador for Mettler thread, but I don't discuss that because I want people to make their own choices
True. True.
of what
It's
is
helpful
best
to
for
hear.
them.
It is helpful, though, to hear from somebody who has extensively used these products, what they think about them. I always appreciate people's honest opinion about things.
And
So,
I mean, I'll show you this. We're talking about that. I'll show you this.
yeah.
Because I'm an ambassador for Mettler, I get to go to the Dutch distributor, which has all the Mettler thread in stock. Every color, every size, and you just go down the rows and pick out what you want.
Right.
But he also, because he works in the fashion industry, he carries other thread. And because I hand sew, I don't like to see my thread show in my seam. So I do really, really small stitches with really thin thread.
So what, like about an
So
80 weight?
Oh, this one, this one's 120.
Wow. I didn't even know there was 120.
It's a polyester thread from Mettler. Absolutely love it. I'll put it here. Can you see it in there?
Yeah, sort of.
It's like a hair in the camera.
Yeah.
I have 150 weight as well.
Oh, 150 weight. That would make it almost invisible.
It is. And it is. And I use that a lot for the applique. And then before we get to this one, I'll go here. I have to pull it out of my Bernina because I've been piecing with this thread. This is actually my favorite piecing thread. It is a 60 weight silk finish cotton from Mettler. And you can hardly see it. But what makes it silk finish, what I like about the Mettler is they run their thread through a flame after it's spun, so all the lint and the fuzz is off of it. So it's a very smooth, fine thread with cotton with very little lint.
Yeah, that would be good.
That's one of the things. But this is 60 weight. This is actually my favorite. It's a color called Candle Wicking. It's color 3000. And it is almost invisible no matter wherever you use it. You can use it on white, you can use it on black, and it's almost invisible. I've been making lace. This is another Iman company. This is called Belfield. This is Spanish. This is a 70 weight cotton. And I've been making lace with it.
Yeah. You can see that a little bit more because it's a little thicker.
Actually, it should be thinner. It's 70 weight.
Oh.
But it's wider. It's not.
Oh, okay.
This is like a beigey color. It's not beige. It's not off-white. It's called candlewick. It's a really weird color, but it's almost invisible.
Yeah.
I like it even better than using grays. But this is white that I've been making lace with.
Right.
Now we get to that. We have all this. I have all this Mettler thread, and I just wanted some thread to play with. So my dealer pulled this out. This is a 10,000 spool of 60 weight cotton from an industrial factory in Italy. And it's 2-ply. What am I describing?
Sounds like Orifil.
That's exactly what it is. It's the industrial version of Orifil.
Yeah. And how much is on that spool?
10,000 meters.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is really hard to find.
Yeah, I was going to say I've never seen it here.
I've seen it once, and I've gone back to get more, and he's out of it, and he can't get any more. And he told me get me some if it ever showed up again.
Yeah.
But it's from the actual most thread companies don't make their thread.
Right.
So this is actually from the thread company that makes the Orifil.
Yeah.
And Orifil puts them on those pretty little spools and charges you.
Yes.
This was 12. This was €12.
So that's about what? About $24 Canadian.
No, about 15, 16 Canadian dollars.
Is that all it is? I'm not sure what the euro is next to the Canadian dollar these days.
Well, but a spool of Orifil here is €14 for the little red spool.
Yeah, yeah.
Same factory. So you have to be careful. And that's also like something, there's a big Dutch thread company here called Forbatex, which is very famous. They make beautiful threads. And one of the places, if you're in the States, the Sewology thread from Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, well, see, we don't have Hobby Lobbies in Canada, so.
Well, and I mean, but I know you have a lot of people in America. That's their famous cotton thread. And if you get it from them, it's more expensive than it is if it comes from Hobby Lobby.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because Hobby Lobby white labels it, just like Orifil white labels this.
Right.
Yep. You know, and that's what they do. And these thread companies, and it's just like, Gutermann used to be a German company, but they were bought out by Amrich and Fried. It's Amerifeld or something. Amrich Friedrich. It's A&E, which is an American company. They are massive.
No.
And honestly, I think their quality's gone down.
Yeah. Well, it happens when sometimes when these companies get too big. You know, that's what does happen. But I want to move on here a little bit because I'm a little bit aware of our time here as well. So if you had all the money in the world, is there a piece of equipment you would want to buy?
Not at this moment.
Nope. So you're happy with everything you've got now. No desire to have a long arm? Of course, you probably don't have the room for it.
That's my issue, not the money. My issue is space.
It's space.
I make a joke. If I put a long arm with a 12-foot frame, which is a small one, I would have to give up going to the bathroom.
Yeah, well, I know they're big monsters. So that brings me to your sewing space. I know behind you is your design wall, and I know that your overall space where you live, because you've said before, is very tiny. So you have shown it on the Quilter's Way, your sewing area.
And that's why I'm in here. There's one corner that's a mess, but I'll show you my little space.
Yeah.
It's basically a 20 by 20 meter room.
Mm.
And let's see here. We take it out. I took my bed out of here, moved my bed into the dining room because this is the dining room. Since COVID, I can shut my quilting off in here and keep it separate. And I might move it back around after COVID, but I like having it separate. But here, let me turn the camera around. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, there it is.
There you go.
There's my computer. This case right here is every color of isocord thread. And I use it as a workspace. But this is a RMF cabinet, which makes horn, I think. They make the horn cabinets.
Oh, right,
well.
right.
But they're a German company. And it has leaves. It has leaves that go out the back, and then it has a big leaf. And it's even with my desk over here. And I usually have my pressing and cutting there. But also because of COVID, I moved that in the other room, so I have to get up and move.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
This is my little Bernina. Absolutely love it for sewing. It's perfect. And one of the things about this table in particular is, as you can see, it sews flat.
Yeah.
And it has all the extensions for quilting. My faff will fit in here as well, and I have an insert for the faff as well. But it also, if you lower the machine, you have a light table.
Oh, okay.
Built into it. And then my printer, my Martelli thread stands, which they're a godsend unto themselves. Right. And then I have my Janome here, and I've been planning a new embroidery project using it. One of the things I really do like about the Janome is the robotic arm in the back.
Yeah.
It's a great space saver. It is on a Martelli tilt table, which is also fantastic. And one of the great features is you can store all your little stuff like your scissors and your USB sticks, needles, all those little things out of the way, but they're easily accessible. And usually my faff sits here, and this table is big enough for my faff and the extended embroidery arm.
Yeah. So you've really utilized your small space well.
Yes. And just for all the people, even though I cut generously, and how I cut my strips is I use a Martelli skinny ruler, and I actually cut both sides of the strip on each of the rulers because the rulers are like the size you want.
Right.
You'll have a 2.5 inch wide by 24-inch ruler.
So
I cut on both sides. That's 2 years worth of scraps right there.
Yeah. Yeah, they multiply, don't they?
Well, but that's all I have. That is all the scraps I have for 2 years.
Wow.
And most of them are too small to use. They're too narrow to even crumb quilt with.
Yeah.
So,
I have a lot of scraps that I saved. Actually, I've stopped saving scraps. If they're really smaller than 2.5 inches, they're gone.
Well, my local quilt shop, one of the things, and you might want to mention it or your people might want to mention it, is mine does, and I do it a lot, is I save my bigger scraps because I know I'm not going to use them. I save my bigger scraps to, they have a box as you walk in the door and they have all the little scraps that people
Yeah.
collect.
Right.
And add some, take some, add some, take
Mm.
some. So if you're crumb quilting or whatever, just take you a big old pile and take them home
Way to
and
go.
have fun.
No, that's a good
And
idea.
and then this is, and design wall is hanging on packs from IKEA.
Oh, okay.
You know, the packs
Yeah.
closets.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things about packs is they perfectly hold bolts of fabric.
Oh, good. Good
You
storage
can slide
advice.
slide a bolt of fabric in. And
Oh,
then I also have a shelf of pre-cut. I have a closet full of bolts, and because I buy fabric wholesale, so you have to buy it by the bolt.
right.
So
So speaking of buying
that's
fabric,
basically my little sewing.
so speaking of buying
Yeah.
fabric, is buying fabric where you live, is it easy? Are there lots of fabric stores or do you have to buy more online?
There are a lot of stores, but it's very, very expensive. You were even cheap for us.
Oh, right. Well, so what would you say a meter of fabric? What's the average cost?
18 to 20 euro, which would be about 30
Yeah.
Canadian
Yep.
dollars.
That's,
And that's
yep,
for
that's
toner.
pricey.
If you want tape, it's in 30, 35 euro.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very pricey. Yep. That's almost
So,
double what we pay on average
yeah.
here for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the issue is I could order it from America, but here they tax you for sewing supplies. You get a 7% import duty on the value. So
Oh,
whatever you pay for the fabric, add 7%, and then add 21% VAT, or I think you call it GST.
yeah. Yeah.
21% GST to that 7%, to the cost of the fabric and the cost of the shipping.
Wow. Wow. How can you even afford to quilt at those prices? I mean, talk about, it's an expensive hobby to start with, but geez, that's unbelievable.
That's why I have been lucky. I have been in a small town, and we go back to people who have influenced me and helped me. There's a German long arm quilter called Claudia Feil. She's in Krefeld, Germany, and she is just, her long arm quilting is like, ugh. Oh my, that woman can make a long arm dance.
Oh,
And I've taken several classes, but through her, I've been introduced to several people who have introduced me to other people, like I, because I have a consulting business. I've consulted all my life, so I have a company here.
right.
So I get my fabric from the Benartex distributor from the Netherlands.
Hmm.
And I get my thread from the Mettler distributor for
Yeah.
the Netherlands, which I buy at wholesale, which is, most people can't do that.
Right.
And it's just, but it makes it affordable. But also what the issue of buying wholesale is, you have to buy a bolt. So you better like that fabric when you buy it.
Yeah, for sure on that. So, I was going to ask you about experts and things like that and sources, and you've already touched on all of those. So I want to do sort of a bit of a change in direction here. And
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit about the fact that you are a male quilter, so am I. And I just want to know what your experiences have been as a male quilter, because we've entered into a world that has traditionally been more female oriented.
The truth is, I find the really, really good high-end quilters are open, friendly, helpful. The middle of the ground or the wannabes are nasty.
Yeah.
I have been run out of so many groups. Me and a friend in America started a small group on Facebook because we had been pretty much run out of all the women's groups for
Right.
whatever reason. And even though I used to belong to the male quilting group on Facebook, but I just got tired of things that went on there.
Yeah.
And the types of quilts that they made, I just thought it was very inappropriate.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Well,
and so, but then I'm brave enough that I just message somebody, and if they reply, like you have a very, very famous quilter in Canada. They are in Saskatoon called Bernie and Shelley Tobish.
oh yes, yes.
And they're the other big quilters with their advice, their products, their acorn precision piecing
Yep.
really, really upped my game back to I'm almost back to where I was at.
Yeah. Well,
And I speak to them all the time.
so moving on from that a little bit, because yeah, I've had some bad experiences with guilds and things like that too, as well, and partly due to the fact that I am a male. And so, sometimes seems like I think it may be changing because there's more and more men getting into quilting. But to move away from that a little bit, and this is something you suggested to me, which I had not thought of, but the expression quilt police. What does that
oh,
bring to mind when you hear that?
bitchy, grumpy old women.
Oh, I'm going to get comments on this one, but that's okay.
Well, and I'll give you a prime example. I was on a group called the Pattern Review,
Right.
which is an online forum for sewing machines and patterns. Met some wonderful people on that group. I was in the Bernina group, and we were talking about something, and we were talking about the 880 Berninas.
Right.
And I said, my dealer told me not to get one because you have a 50-50 chance of having a good or a bad experience. They went off on me, telling me I didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, this is what my dealer told me, and I trust him. And the bobbin issues and all this in this real fancy machine. And this woman come on, just laid into me heavily about she has one of these 880s, has never had a problem. Then 1 week later, after she laid into me, she was complaining about exactly what I was talking about. And when I called her out on it, they basically ran me out of the group.
Oh, didn't like the fact that you were right and they were wrong. Yeah, I can see that.
Well,
but back
and
yeah.
I mean, it was only a week, and then I belonged to a quilting group on Facebook, and I would give people advice. And like I told them, I said, go to Goodwill, get you some nice dress shirts, cut them up if you're starting. Men's striped dress shirts make the most beautiful quilt fabric that could ever be.
Yeah.
I was told, oh no, you can't have that. I was run out of this group because it was not quilters cotton.
Oh, okay. Purists, were they?
It was not Moda.
Oh, okay.
And that's the same thing I get in some of these women. You've got to have a Bernina, you got to use Orfil, and you got to use Moda fabric.
Right. Yeah, I know that. So if you were going to well, I want to talk a little bit. I know what kind of quilter you are, but I want to extend it a little further to artists, because as far as I'm
Yes.
concerned, quilters are artists. But when you
Yes.
talk about these people who have this very blinkers on kind of attitude towards an art form, so how would you describe yourself then as an artist? Like, are you experimental, innovative, inspirational, all of the above?
I am very, very traditional, and I haven't mentioned my Facebook group, but it's part of this conversation. As
Yeah.
we were talking about the groups, me and a friend created a Facebook group called Quilting on a Budget.
Quilting on a budget.
And me and my friends started it, and it's grown to, we're at like 55, 60,000 people now.
Wow.
And it's a really active group, and we have 3 rules: no religion, no politics, and no selling.
Yeah. Good.
That's our, if you violate one of those 3, you're gone. If you create too much drama, you're gone.
On.
And we always get someone who tries to create the drama and all that. And one of the things that I have tried to teach people is how to create their own quilts. Because I'll like post a quilt and they go, "Is there a pattern for it?" That's the first word out of their mouth.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why would you need a pattern for this? It's a basic log cabin. Use 1.5 inch or 2.5 inch strips, whatever you want to use.
Well, I think that brings us back. I think that brings us back to the idea of the quilt police, that some people are uptight if they don't do it exactly by the rules, or it's not exactly perfect. You know, they're afraid of that criticism. And for me and for you, I'm sure it's the same. We do our own thing. And, you know, if it makes us happy, isn't that all that matters here? Because after all, this is a hobby.
Well, this is what I have, and I'm going to give Eleanor Burns a little bad publicity in this conversation. And this is what happened. I followed Quilt in a Day on YouTube, loved her out long videos, loved everything. She came up with this star pattern, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And it was called Orion Star or Teresa Star or something that she named it. So I wrote Quilt in a Day and emailed them, and I said, you know, I live in Europe and I can't get to your store. Is there any way that I can buy the pattern for this block? About 2 weeks later, I get this email back saying, no, that's in Elle's new book, and it will be out in about 1.5 years, and you can wait for then and buy the book. Have a nice day.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But here's what happened. Okay. There's a lady called Barbara Blackman. Do you know Barbara Blackman, who has the encyclopedia?
Yes, I do. I have the encyclopedia.
Well, I have an older copy and I have the newer copy.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking through that, trying to find something to make.
Guess what you found?
What I found in Barbara Blackman's quilt book. It is called The Memory Star, and it's from the 1890s.
Aha.
And what she did, what Eleanor Burns did, was just rename it, and now is going to charge $9.99 for the pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. She's a big business.
That just and that is just irritates me to no end, that these people are taking these old patterns, slightly changing the name, and charging a fortune for them. And you can, and so that is one of the things that I push, that I try to get across to people. And this is something Jenny Beyer also teaches, that she's one of the other people, is how to grid your quilt block.
Mm-hmm.
Most quilt blocks are either in a 4-patch or a 9-patch
right
grid. And if they're like 4x4, which is 16, which is four patches, so break them down. And then I try to instill. And then they're like, well, what size do I cut it? Doesn't matter. If you make all those blocks 2-inch finish, 2.5-inch squares, then fantastic. If you make them 3.5, you're just going to end up with a bigger block.
Yep.
You can make them 5 inches, as long as you know that grid. And that is something that I try, and that's how I was taught 100 years ago.
Yeah,
was how to take something you like and draw a tic-tac-toe board on it and try to make it fit. And let me tell you, if you add enough squares, you can make whatever picture you want fit.
Good. Well, that's good advice.
It either works into a half square triangle or a square.
Yeah. So you're a wealth of knowledge, Rob, but we're now hitting over the 50-minute mark here. So I am going to have to bring it to the end. Either that or we do a part 2, which is a possibility someday. But
that's what I was going to say, because we could have a whole session on fabric, another session on sewing needles, a whole session on thread. We could talk all day about sewing machines, because I have them all.
Yeah.
I have a Bernina, a Janome, and a FAF.
You're actually giving me some ideas here, which I may be bouncing off of you later on. But one thing, just to end everything up, and you've already started doing this, but what would be what is one key piece of advice you'd give anybody who wants to get started or is just getting started into quilting?
Be patient, and don't set your expectations by what you see on YouTube. Because this is something that I always tell people. Most people on YouTube that you're following in quilters has staff.
Right. Well, that's a good piece of advice to know. I know for myself, yep, I sometimes want to get something done really quick, and that's when I screw up. So I need the patience, and it's like any hobby. You get better with time. You get better with time and practice.
You drive me insane by how much you quilt.
I haven't got a life.
It's my whole life, but I only make like 2 or 3 quilts a year.
Well,
because I am very slow at what I do, and I take my time and I enjoy it. And like my friend Seth that we started the group with, he's one of these that just a scrappy quilter that slaps squares together and thinks it's a wonderful quilt. And then he calls me a bougie quilter.
Oh, yeah. Well, it is a hobby, and it's whatever you get out of it. And it isn't a race. It's not a race. It's not a competition. It's just, if it brings you joy, as what's her face that does all the cleaning up videos about. If it brings you joy, then do it. So anyways, I am going to, unfortunately, I know we could talk for days on here. But and we may we can do other ones on specific techniques, because let me tell you, I can make a Bernina rock. Yeah. Well, actually, it's giving me some ideas here. So I'm going to be bouncing a few things off you with that. But for now, you know what we should do, and this will be the last statement. We should do sewing things between your M7 and my Bernina and my FAF. Ooh. of how you would use the different machines. Because if it works on a FAF, it'll work on a Viking. Right. But it's hard to say how it'll work on an M7. So Janome. But that's an interesting idea too. Oh, lots of things here to think about. But for now, I'm going to thank you so much, Rob, for this. And, I'll get back to you on other things, and I'll be seeing you on the Quilter's Way. So thanks again for all of this.